knowing how to manage your health insurance. It's such a complicated system for adults, and like 18 to 20-year-olds to know how to make decisions on what kind of health care plans they need. And, yeah, I agree 100%. There's a lot of talk about it in the declaration.
1 2 1 2.
I had a deal with Lindsay yesterday at noon and telling her what I was doing. She said, well, why don't you send me Joe? I go, I'm a big guy.
Are we ready out back? Well, good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our staff meeting for the 7th day of March. I want to welcome everyone today. Commissioner Howell is in the building. He's just not going to be able to join us for the first couple items that we've got. He is testifying in Topeka. Well, he's here, but he's testifying in Topeka. So we will go ahead and start without him. If we get past the first 2 items, we'll probably take a little short break because he wants to be sure he's here on the last 3. We've got 5 items today, and I'll let the manager take over from here and brief us on what the 5 items are.
Very good. So actually we have 6 because Julie Stimson's going to get up first and talk about statewide tornado drill. We'll let her start the day here.
Good morning, Julie.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. Yes, this morning, about an hour from now, we're going to be making some noise in the county with our tornado sirens. We're going to participate in the statewide tornado drill. We have encouraged everyone to take a moment when that occurs to, if anything, think about where they're going to go if this were to be a real tornado warning, where the shelters are, how you get there. Oh, the mic is on now. Okay, starting over. Julie Stimson, Sedgwick County Emergency Management Director. Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, Commissioners. In about an hour, at 10 a.m., we will be participating in the statewide tornado drill. So we're going to be having some sirens go off. The cell phone notifications are not supposed to go off with this one, the way the National Weather Service is participating in this drill, but we will have some NOAA weather radio activity as well as our tornado sirens throughout the community going off. So we encourage everyone to take a moment to practice their plans if they're home. Where's their safe room? Is it in the basement underground or interior room away from windows? Here for this building, we do have a basement. For tornadoes, elevators may be used. We certainly want to help those who are unable to use stairs, though, into the elevator so they can get below ground. And the courthouse police, if this was a real emergency, they would make some overhead announcements to advise folks to take shelter. So that'll be happening at 10 a.m. this morning. Stay for any questions. Yep.
I don't see any questions. Thank you.
All right, thank you
very much. We look forward to hearing the sirens going off at 10 o'clock.
Chairman, the 5 items you referenced, that just for discussion this morning, no formal action needed. Chris Labram's going to get up and talk about some MABCD appointments. Brent Shelton is here to talk about a Wichita State University request for a letter of support for some federal money. Then we have a discussion on Charter 68, with Joe Thomas is here to lead. Discussion of federal platform, which I think Tanya will lead, and then a discussion on a letter that you all received a week or so ago concerning the use of KPTS facility as a venue for meetings after we move out of this particular building. So we'll do that in this particular order, and your call if you want to recess and wait, but we'll start off with Chris.
Morning, Chris.
Morning, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. Chris Labram, MABCD for the record. So you all are receiving a handout here that are recommended appointments for our advisory boards. We're recommending that we put these on next Wednesday's agenda and appoint these members. So a few things as a reminder, all of our appointments, the MABCD boards are at-large appointments, meaning that the commission appoints them as a body, no individual commission appointments. And all are evenly split between city and county with then 1 member on each board as a joint. So in this case, I've noted the couple board resignations that we had. Otherwise, everyone that we're replacing, it's because they've been termed out. And then also one reason that you're seeing this way is we're in a unique situation where we only got 1 applicant for each of these positions. We've been a little bit delayed because we had to go out a few times and re-advertise to get an applicant for these. So to start with, the Board of Electrical Appeals, which is a 7-member board, you all had reappointed that one a few months ago since we had our journeyman electrician has had some health concerns and has needed to resign based on that. David Urban has applied to replace him. David is an active member with several associations in the electrical industry. He's also been attending board meetings for the last few months in preparation for this, so we think he'll be a very good member. Moving to the mechanical board, which is also a 7 total member board. We've got Jesse Keeley to replace Ron Love, again, who timed out. Scott Smith replacing Joe Samia. in the engineering position. James Lowenstein was our lone member, county member there who could continue, but again also has had some recent health issues. His son has applied to replace him in the HVAC master contractor position, and then Randy Freeman to replace Frank Rash in our city-county joint public at large. The plumbing board, which is a 9 total member board, these are all reappointments, recommending that Seth Harrington, Evan Lease, Sean Conway, Bo Means, and Larry Doherty as the joint public at large member, be reappointed. All of those have applied and requested to do so. So I will pause there for any questions or discussion that you all may have on that.
And when would these come before us?
Hopefully next Wednesday.
Next Wednesday, okay.
Would be the resolutions. That is, I think that's Carol's plan.
Okay, any questions from the board? I don't see any.
All right, thank you, Commissioners. And then, so lastly here, as you know, last week with passing or adopting the nuisance abatement code, that also initiated formation of a nuisance abatement appeals board. So just wanted to put that quickly in front of the Commissioners. Any discussion or direction you may have for me on that. This will be a 5-member appeals board. The code does not put any specific stipulations or qualifications on these members. It also does then, of course, accommodate 1 nominee from each commissioner to, of course, be appointed by the commission as a whole. So a few ways that, of course, this could be handled. We could go through the normal application process, put it out there, see who applies, and go from there. But as a few of you have pointed out, this board is not likely to meet often, and we also have sitting board members between your advisory boards for your districts, between the Metro Area Planning Department board, specifically the Planning Commission, and between my boards. In MABCD, we have several members who obviously would be able to serve in this capacity very well, especially since it would not, we'd be surprised if it even convenes more than once a year, maybe a couple times a year at most. So that would be an option there too. Now the one where you would probably be lacking info is on MABCD board members who live in your district. So if you would like us to, we'd certainly be happy to list those for you, or provide you with a list of MABCD members who may fit that in your areas. And again, you all may already have an idea of who you want to appoint or how you want to handle this. So I just wanted to throw that out and see if what direction you all have for us.
Well, I don't see any other comments right now, but I guess my preference, because our individual appointees to the MAPC are very familiar with zoning, planning, and development in the community. I think they're probably the most qualified to sit on this type of board, and they've got a lot of experience. So I don't know why we wouldn't use our personal appointees, not the at-large, but our 5 personal. If it came down to one of our personal could not serve on this for some reason, I don't know why we couldn't go to the at-large to see if one of those 2 could do it. So any comments from the board? I don't see any, so you might check and see if they would like to serve.
We'll do that.
Okay.
Right.
Anything else for us today?
That's all I have.
Okay.
Thank you,
Chris.
Commissioners.
Brent will talk about the WSU letter now, and I apologize for the how this has just come up, but there's a little bit of a time constraint on this, which is why we want to talk about it today. And I think, Brent, do the commissioners all have copies of it?
Yes.
Very good. So he'll go ahead and cover that very quickly.
Okay. Good morning, Brent.
Good morning, Chairman Dennis. Good morning, Commissioners. Brent Shelton with the Division of Finance. As you all know, the ARPA legislation allocated $1.9 trillion to recovery from the pandemic. One of the initiatives from that is some money that went to the Economic Development Administration of the federal government, and they have a $1 billion Build Back Better Regional Challenge. That is supposed to boost economic recovery from the pandemic, rebuild communities, And they're trying to invest in transformational regional industry clusters across the country. Want to improve our global competitiveness, create good jobs, and so forth. So the application process that they put out in the fall of last year was a two-phase process. The first phase was received 592 applicants. Of those, they winnowed that to 60 finalists. There were 5 applicants from the state of Kansas. There's now 1 finalist from the state of Kansas. So that's Wichita State University, and they have developed what they call a South Kansas Coalition. Their proposal or their grant application is called Driving Adoption Smart Manufacturing Technologies. They're applying for a $67 million grant through this program. They would propose to use the funds in several different areas. One is to construct an 80,000 square foot facility at NCAT to provide some advanced manufacturing and research training to develop the workforce and continue to expand our workforce to meet jobs and demand that are anticipated in the future. They've also created the South Kansas Coalition. It's comprised of a number of partners throughout the region, focusing on cyber manufacturing. They would focus on developing a community where they're looking at different research, best industry practices, and so forth, and would then partner with each other. It gives access to small and mid-sized manufacturers that may not have the capacity to invest in some of the smart manufacturing technology. They're looking, in addition to aircraft manufacturing or aviation, looking at the semiconductor industry, cyber manufacturing, and so forth. So basically, it's to provide access to all the supply chain for aviation, as well as the approximately 900 manufacturers that are in the region. So it's economic growth, new jobs, and what they are asking the commission for is to sign a letter of support. You have a copy of what I think is close to, if not a final iteration of that. We speak to our entrepreneurial and manufacturing history, specifically in aviation, talk about the support that the county has provided for manufacturing and economic development, going back from our work with building NCAT and other things, initiatives that the county has funded, and as well as some current efforts that are underway. So you have a copy of the letter. I would ask that if you approve this, then we'll prepare it for all 5 commissioners' signatures. They think that will make the strongest statement of support, and we'll get that in front of you for signatures. So whatever questions you might have, I'll attempt to answer them.
Okay, so the intent is to place this on Sedgwick County letterhead with all 5 commissioners' name on the letterhead, and then have a signature block for all 5 commissioners. The second question I've got is, we're going to vote on this then tomorrow during during the board meeting to do this, or where are we going to get approval, because we don't vote today?
Okay, I would defer to Mr. Papoon whether or not we need to have a formal action or whether you can consent to do it here.
Mr. Chairman, Brent gave me a call and gave me a heads up on this morning, and I think I told Brent that I would prefer, unless there was an immediate time crunch, that we just take it up off agenda tomorrow and get the commission to formally approve it. Obviously, we have one commissioner that's not even here right now that's probably going to want to be able to look at it, and it would look funny to have the letter without all the commissioner signatures on it, probably. So.
Okay, I was also going to recommend that Brent go in and brief Commissioner Howell. I did give him a copy of this morning. Brent handed it to me just about 10 minutes ago, and so I gave a copy of it to Commissioner Howell, so he's aware of it at this point in time. Also, do you have this in electronic format that you can send to our secretaries so that they don't have to retype this entire thing, that they can kind of just paste it into our letterhead?
Absolutely. I typed it once. They don't have to retype it.
Good. Okay, Commissioner Meissner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, is there a time crunch to get this done, or tomorrow? Okay.
Tomorrow will be fine.
Okay.
They've got a deadline this week to
Okay.
get this submitted. So if we can
Alright.
get it to them tomorrow, that'd be great.
Yeah, I'm a little bit familiar with this, this endeavor that we're trying to pull off here, and it encompasses a lot of the south central Kansas area, not just Sedgwick County or NCAT, but whatever, but it's a broad-based, and as you said, 500 applicants, and narrowed it down to 60, and we made the final 60, and some of our neighboring cities, nobody else in Kansas got it, and I think Tulsa was aggressively going after it, and I don't think they made the finals, and I don't think Oklahoma City did either. So this is really good for our region. And I just read the letter for the first time, but I think it's well written. It encompasses, the bullets encompass a lot of the recent investments and victories, and so I'm wholly supportive of this, and hope that the commissioners would, because at this point there's not a dollar amount yet, but this is to get the Build Back Better grant awarded.
This could exceed $50 to $60 million
Right.
in local money coming locally.
That's what I was gonna, if that was available to know, because sometimes we spend a lot of effort on $2 and $3 million grant applications, and this one is far beyond anything in this region that GWP and others are familiar with. This is a huge opportunity that's way larger financially than anything we've tried to do before. So it's a good day if we can win this one. Thank you.
Any other questions from the commission? All right, we'll place it on off-agenda item tomorrow. I'll work with the manager and with Commissioner Lopez to figure out exactly where we put it on the agenda tomorrow for an off-agenda item, and we can vote for it at that time. If you would please send your typed electronic version to Lisa and Carol so that they can start preparing it. If we vote to pass it, why, it's already prepared.
Absolutely, will do.
All right, Brent, thank you. I texted Commissioner Howell a moment ago, and I have not received an answer back from him yet, so I'm not quite sure how much longer that it's going to be. So we need to take a little short break. Don't go too far, so as soon as, because we got like 5 more items to cover, 3 more items, okay? Good. So don't go too far, and we'll take a short break. Thank you all. Please have their seats. We've got everyone back. Okay, are we ready to retransmit? Very good. Well, welcome back. Sorry, that was a very short break. We want to welcome Commissioner Howell back to the bench, and we'll continue on with letter to, we've got the letter to WSU, Charter 68.
Very good. Charter 68, and we'll talk federal platform after that.
Morning, Joe.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and Commissioners. I had to think about what day it was. I was thinking it was Wednesday. It's Tuesday. Glad to be here with you this morning, and we're going to talk about a subject that comes up many times when you're dealing with public agency purchasing policy, and that is the local preference purchasing policy. So first, what we'll do is give a general definition of local purchase policy. And as you'll find out as we go in our discussion, that even though I'm giving a general definition, there's not always a simple or single definition when it comes to local preference. We'll talk about the objectives that local preference is used to meet, the methods in which one can employ or institute a local preference policy, the pros and cons of a local policy, and then, like I mentioned earlier, the definition, defining further what is localness, what does that mean? We'll do a little peer review, look at some of the other surrounding agencies, contiguous states, to see what they do. And then we'll talk about two separate Kansas statutes that relate directly to what public agencies can do when dealing with a non-local vendor. We'll also discuss best practices by the National Association in regards to public procurement. And then we'll talk about some alternate proactive measures that the purchasing department has been doing for many years, continues to aggressively do in order to promote our local vendors' participation, as well as some of the disadvantaged entities that exist here. So a general definition of local preference is when a jurisdiction establishes a policy that allows preference to be given to a local vendor in the awarding of contracts. This is really a direct financial advantage that goes to those local companies, allows them to receive it, and especially is when they are not the low responsive bid. And so this makes provisions for those who are not low responsive bidders to have an opportunity to receive the award. The objectives of a local purchasing policy, of course, is to protect and promote the local businesses and their interest. It's also used to enhance job and wealth creation. The increase of the tax base, which of course subsequently would improve revenue collection. And then what some economists call the multiplier effect, or recycling dollars locally. And so there's been a lot of studies, but nothing really definitive in regards to the cost versus the benefit when it comes to that. There's different papers, but none of them have really precisely defined a direct correlation between those dollars and what's being put back in the economy and recycled. What are some of the methods that are used? There are various methods that can be used to create this local preference. One of the ones is a tie bid. So, and this case is very rare, but at times does happen, where you have a tie bid between a local company, a non-local company, and so this gives the preference to the local company if in a case of a tie bid. The next one's a little more what's used whenever this policy is put in place, and that's the percentage preference. And basically that says that the higher bid may be the local vendor has a higher bid, but we allow a certain percentage within the low bid as a band to allow the local vendor to be chosen. So for example, we may say 3% preference. So as long as the local bid is no more than 3% higher than the non-local bid, which would be the low responsive bid, then they would be awarded, the local vendor would be awarded the contract. Another method is to set a percentage. It basically acts as a penalty to the low bid of the non-local vendor, stating that the bid they provide that's low responsive automatically add a percentage to it, and then that would create an opportunity for the local vendor to be awarded as well. Then there's one called price matching, where if the local vendor has an opportunity to match the price of the non-local. And again, that's a percentage too. And some have used this, that you have a 3% allowance. You're with the where the local vendor is no more than 3% higher than the non-local. Then you give them an opportunity with a certain period of time to match the low responsive bid of the non-local vendor. And then here's reciprocal. We find reciprocal and tie bid are seen a lot in most of the states. And basically that says that if a non-local vendor comes in and presents a bid to the purchasing agency, and that state has a preference policy, then we have the opportunity and we can utilize the same math or whatever figures they have in their particular policy. So reciprocates with that jurisdiction. So if the state of Missouri has a preference of 1%, then we can, and they bid on some of the business here in Wichita, then we can apply that particular penalty or their policy to our bid. And finally, there's just the absolute, that regardless of the pricing, the award will go to the local vendor. What are the pros in regards to a local preference policy? Well, of course, we think about keeping the money in the community. We talked earlier about the recycling of funds within a local economy. It saves local jobs, preserves the jobs in that particular area. And in some cases, we see it attracts new businesses into the community because of having that preference policy, and thereby, again, increasing that tax base that we spoke of earlier. It can also act as a stimulus for further growth of the local business as they get more sales, more business from the public agency. And of course, they put that back into the company or in paying of dividends or however they want to disperse those funds. And then it promotes just a general goodwill with local businesses by having that preference policy. Of course, with all things, there comes a con, or the opposing view of what a policy may do. And in this case, there are few in regards to local preference. One of those is the increase to the cost of goods and services. And many times this is equal to the percentage of preference that is allowed. And that has been a trend that has been seen anytime a local preference policy has been put in, a gradual increase, less competitive bids. The other one is the reciprocal that we talked about earlier, the invitation to use reciprocity. That would inhibit local businesses because we know Wichita is a nice-sized market, but there are other larger markets that many of our local vendors would like to do business in. And so if you have a preference in our area or local area, then as they try to get business in other areas which may not have a local preference, they will reciprocate. And many times it may inhibit the local vendor from being able to do business outside the jurisdiction. The other is discouraging outside vendors from submitting bids. If the vendors know that we're taking the bids and using them to try to encourage local vendors, eventually it kind of discourages, in many cases it discourages outside vendors from just submitting a bid because they feel it's not going to be considered on a competitive basis. Another is the possibility of creating a public perception, and that's of tax subsidies. That it may be a relatively small group of taxpayers is getting the subsidy, then is that fair for other businesses or residential taxpayers? Also, what's seen whenever a local preference is put in place, you see the number of bid protests, they increase, some disputes, and in rare cases, we do see some serious lawsuits based on this what appears to be political favoritism. So, and there is some case law about the Constitution in regards to states competing with other states. And the use of taxpayer money, as we said, to subsidize instead of seeking the best value. So is it better to provide subsidies to a particular group, or should we look for the best price, get the best value for the taxpayer dollar? And then, as we mentioned earlier, one of the biggest questions and a very contentious issue is what's local? What's localness? And we'll talk about that now. How do you define local? And there are many definitions of local. For instance, would a local vendor be a taxpayer, but their business was outside the county or the city? What about if the local business owned property in the county? Would that be considered localness? Should there be a certain length of time that the business be established within the county? What if a business just came in to get a particular bid and had not established any longevity with being a part of the community? Some say, well, what about the representative, the sales rep? He lives here. Should that be considered as local vendor because of his residence? Should the business pay taxes to the county? Or what if the business is located outside the county, but the majority of the employees are county residents? Or what if it's located outside the county, but not the majority of the employees, but the stockholders are those that reside in the county? And again, as we mentioned earlier with the sales representative scenario, what if you just had a warehouse, a distribution center, or small branch? Would that be considered local? We did some checking of several of the states and counties around the area, and there were a few that did have a preference policy. As you can see, Kansas City, Kansas did not, Lenexa, Overland Park, Topeka, Butler County, Johnson County, and Wyandotte Unified Government did not. However, we did find in Hutchinson, they have a preference policy, and it talks about any purchases over $15,000. The amount of the quotation of the vendor domicile within the Reno County should be no more than 5% greater, or if the low quotation is under 15,000. If it's over 15,000, they cannot be more than 3% greater. So it's a very particularly percentage-wise, as we talked about earlier. And the same with Lawrence. Yes, it talked about here the city of Lawrence. If a business entity is no more than 1% and no more than $10,000 higher than the lowest responsible bid, they may be preferred. And so there are a few. And then we looked at some of the contiguous states. In Oklahoma City, as well as Oklahoma and Tulsa counties, they said they did not have a preference, as well as city of Tulsa. Didn't hear back from Denver. And I did not find anything on the website that specifically addressed that subject. And then Omaha does have a local preference for very small businesses. So here in the state of Kansas, there are a couple of statutes, as we mentioned earlier. Most of the states use two in particular to protect local vendors or domicile vendors in their state. And for Kansas, it's the 75-3740, which is the tie bid, as we mentioned earlier. So if the non-domiciled and the domiciled vendor are competing and it's a tie, of course it would be awarded to the bidder within the state. The second is the reciprocal preference, and again, that's allowing us to apply the same percentage of preference that a non-local vendor would use if we were bidding in their locality. When it comes to best practices, the National Association of Governmental Procurement, NIGP, which represents many of the public agencies around the country, has a resolution that basically is highlighted in blue the points wanted to make that they emphasize, and that's that they believe in free, open, competitive process, that the participant be able to have an equal footing when providing bids, that not having local preference having local preference results in reduced competition and increased prices. And so their resolution is that the preference is not to have any type of preference law or practice because they feel it would be impediment to competitive procurement in a free enterprise system. So even though we don't have a local preference policy, there are some proactive measures that Sedgwick County has been doing and has been really getting more involved in as time has gone on, along with the other agencies here in town, such as USD 259, City of Wichita, and Wichita State University. And that's currently offering the outreach and educational programs to vendors, helping vendors see how can you write a bid, how can you draft a responsive bid, so that you're not just competitive here, but when you're seeking business in other jurisdictions, you have those tools in your toolkit to help you to be able to do that. We also work with the other public agencies to share our vendor databases, which include minority, women-owned business, local businesses, and we meet periodically to discuss new entrants into the market and how we can help assist these local vendors. In fact, I was on a meeting last night where the public agencies met with Create Community and the Black Business Roundtable group in order to see how we can help those small businesses. We participate in matchmaking events, and we're very happy, especially our friends over at the city have done an excellent job of creating these virtual and in-person matchmaker events, which they allow us to participate in. We've tried several of our own as well and hope to increase doing that. But those have been a very nice tool to help local vendors see that it's not difficult to do business with a public agency. That's the biggest issue we see, is that trepidation of that first bid, making that first effort. And once they do that, it seems that a lot of that fear dissipates, and so we encourage them to participate. And then here, Sedgwick County, we have goals. We don't have any set-asides, but we do have goals that we try to meet in order to encourage local participation. So I thought I'd give you some figures about the overall purchases for last year, and then how the percentages of Kansas-based and Wichita vendors out of that total dollar figure. So in 2021, our purchases total $152,042,271.40. Now, out of that total dollar figure, about 60%, or a little over 91 million, was made with Kansas-based vendors, all including Wichita. But then we segregated the Wichita vendors out of that 91,000, 78%, or about 71 million, were made with Wichita-based vendors. So that's basically what I have to share with you this morning, and any questions you may have, I'll hopefully be able to try to answer for you.
Well, thank you, Joe. I appreciate the presentation. Actually, last night, Mike Papoon came to my Citizens Advisory Board and used your briefing. He did a great job. My Citizens Advisory Board did not want any changes to our local preference or any of our procurement processes right now, but I want to thank him for coming last night and using your briefing. You're much smoother. No, I'm sorry.
I know the truth.
He did a great job. I just always like to give Mike Papoon trouble. You have a comment, Mr.
He's going to
Papoon?
take it out on me, so.
No. Joe really wanted to go to Goddard last night. I had to fight him for that.
I know, driving out west was a struggle for
Getting
Mike
stuck on Kellogg
Papoon.
after a wreck was kind of topped off the evening, too. But I just wanted to remind the commission, we've been doing these charter purchasing resolutions for a long time, and I've been involved with a lot of them. We've looked at issues. It regularly comes up looking at, giving preference to local vendors. We've had people on the bid board who felt very strongly that we should keep our tax dollars in town, and were very upset at times when the local car dealer didn't get a bid when it ended up going out of the county. We've looked at times at giving preference to women and minority-owned businesses and looking at the legal issues involved there. And so this comes up periodically, but this is a charter resolution, which means that it takes 4 of you to want to look at us changing this resolution, and we'll have to vote for it before we can make any changes. We looked at it a couple of years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, because a commissioner wanted to look at maybe giving nonprofit organizations in the city some preference in selling their products to the county, and that made some changes, but that never went anywhere because there wasn't a consensus on the county commission to move forward. But if 4 of you want us to revisit this at some point, come back with changes, we'll be happy to look at that. But it is a charter resolution, and so that is a little extra obstacle we have in making any changes. And I'll be happy to answer any other questions.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a couple questions. On the tie bid option, it seems to me that if all things are being equal, without changing the charter, that the bid board has a choice at that point to pick whichever one they think is best, correct?
Yes, and that's happened, very rarely happens as tie bid, but yes, it's backed up by the state, but yes, the bid board would pick the local vendor.
So we could put in policy a reduction of options, I suppose, but I would say if all things are being equal, and I know they would also be looking at things like their ability to perform the contract or provide the item or whatever it is. I mean, there's other thoughts that have to go into the selection of who we do business with, but to me, I would just assume if everything was equal, they probably would more likely give the business to someone local. That's kind of a natural thing I think would happen. The percentage preference and the reciprocal, in my opinion, are it's really two ways of describing basically the same thing, is it not?
Well, the percentage preference, it describes the methodology. The reciprocal describes action you take against the methodology. So your percentage preference tells you how you can establish that allowing a preference based on the percentage. This reciprocity says that regardless of how it's set, whether it's a percentage, whether that if some other state or jurisdiction does that, you can reciprocate exactly, apply what they're doing. So the reciprocation just says regardless of what methodology is used, you're allowed to use that in your favor.
It's interesting also that the state has a law where they describe the word domicile. The word domicile, I think, to the state of Kansas would be the same idea of the word local to the county. It's a very similar thought. So I wonder, does state law define the word domicile?
Mike?
I'm sure it does, Commissioner. I haven't looked at that recently, but I can see if we have a definition for that. I don't know if that has to do with when a business registers with the Secretary of State or something like that.
I mean, they'd have the same problems with the stockholders and the people living in the state. Maybe the business is out of the state, but people live in the state, or the business is registered in the state, but really it's more business outside the state. I mean, all the same things you talked about a minute ago would happen at the state level, and yet they have apparently codified the idea that by using that word domicile, somehow they've tackled that question. So it's just interesting that they've gone down that path. I had another question here. It was, when it comes to Kansas tax law, a lot of businesses now have registered as LLCs for lots of reasons, primarily tax advantages. But if your business is registered as an LLC, then you're no longer considered an owner, but you're considered a member. And I'm curious, how does that play into the women-owned businesses and minority-owned businesses or local businesses if someone is representing their business as an LLC? Do those ideas drop off because of that?
I don't think the way the corporation or business is structured affects whether they are considered. It's as long, like for instance, with the women-owned, minority-owned business, as long as they are incorporated or owned or have a location here in Wichita, Kansas, regardless of whether they're an LLC or incorporated, we consider them all on the same basis. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, I guess it does. To me, it's a curious thing. And then, as I say, finally, a lot of things we spec out that really seem to have the biggest conflict are things like vehicles. And I know that there ends up being options that are available. We buy a dump truck, and one dump truck has a different engine than the other dump truck, for example. So we like the one that's got a certain engine or something. So if you can get the exact same everything from different vendors, that goes back into this charter. But most of the time, I guess my opinion is those really high-end items, especially things like fire trucks, ambulances, and things like that. It seems to me like there's an apples and oranges comparison that has to happen because we're not really comparing exactly the same product. And so we end up possibly spending more money for what we want because we've spec'd it out a certain way, and someone else can't provide that the way that we've spec'd it out. So our specs become very specific. It sounds redundant to say it that way, but the specificity of our requests really limits to what we can buy, and because of the exclusive nature of what's available out there, the prices may not be the best prices. So my biggest concern on this entire topic is for those high-end items is to not have specs that are not important. If the gauge is 3.5 inches versus 3.25 inches, I don't know that I care the size of the gauge. I mean, if it was half the size, maybe it would matter. But if the gauge is close to the same, I don't know that it matters. We've had those types of debates in the past, and I don't know. To me, that's the bigger topic here. When it comes to small stuff, I don't think there's much debate. I like what we do currently, and I probably wouldn't support a change in the charter. But I think that when it comes down to those really, really large items or very expensive items, that's where I think this debate gets a lot more attention. And I don't think most of the time we're really comparing apples and apples. So, just my opinion. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Joe, for the presentation. I'm kind of familiar historically with reviewing of this. When we were at the city, we did this a couple of times as well. And I know right before I got here, there was a thing you referenced to, Mike, with a nonprofit opportunity. So I was getting ready to start to write down all these reasons that are very, very difficult, but your cons slide and your definition slide, and all those things, I don't need to rehash them because I think it's spot on. And thanks for actually doing the survey of our local, our regional cities, and we're in a position here in Wichita and Sedgwick County where we have been really reaching out as a regional center of economic activity and growth, and it'll be really difficult for me and for other people that sell our region to say, and by the way, if you come to bid, you better have an office here and two people here. It's a quagmire from my history, and if you give a percentage, it may sound not like a big deal, but as Jim's familiar, when you have a $90 million construction opportunity, 2 or 3% is a big number. And so there's so many issues. Commissioner Howell referenced a couple of them. I think that you all do a nice job, and eventually every bid still comes to us for final approval. And I think I've had 2 times in my 9 years of service that said, there was a legitimate reason why a company was saying, hey, I don't think we were treated fairly, and although I don't like to get involved in your job and us meddle in that process, but if there is a legitimate concern, we can always ask for you to re-review or ask the committee to review, make sure you take into account this complaint. And so I think we do a fair and transparent job, and I think you're exactly right. I love your last slide about the education world. I think that's really good. I have been at a few chamber meetings and events where, when they do matchmaking offers, and you're right, it is intimidating the first time, especially if you're just starting out and how do I get in past first base? And but I'm really glad that we do have the matchmaking things and the educational things. So I think you cover that. So I would probably, I would echo what Commissioner Howell said, that I just think that we do a fine job. We keep looking at everything. And unless there was something that you brought to us today that I said, oh, I've never thought of that, then I was prepared to relook at it. But everything you prepared, I quit taking notes because you're right. And so I think every business knows how to bid, and they learn how to bid, and they know how to sharpen their pencil, and so I'm not really in favor of moving off of what we do now or making a change. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the things that we discussed last night at the Citizens Advisory Board is if you watch our board meeting on Wednesday and Joe comes up, and Joe, truly you and your staff do a tremendous job on procurement. I appreciate it very much. But if you watch our board meeting, you'll brief 5 or 6 items that's worth millions of dollars, and there will be a motion and a second, no discussion, and we vote, and we suddenly spent several $1 million. But what the public didn't see was leading up to that point is that every commissioner received a Word document and a spreadsheet from your office that told us exactly how many bids went out, how many people bid, exactly broken out by items, what those bids were. And then the bid board meets in here and they go through it. Then we receive the minutes of that bid board. Every commissioner has an opportunity to review those. We often have questions of you and your staff, and you come in and brief us individually. So I just want to make sure the public knows that there's a lot more goes into that than a short briefing of 5 or 6 items by you and a motion and a second by the commission, that this is something that's scrutinized very carefully. I see Jim Weber in the back of the room. He can verify that I scrutinize a lot of his things, as he spends a lot of our money. But these items come up, and I really do believe that the way that we do procurement here is fair and equitable, and it is the lowest price for our community when we settle on something. So again, I don't see anything else, but I want to thank you and your staff for what you do.
Well, thank you, commissioners. Appreciate your nice, fine, and encouraging comments.
Thank you. Mr. Manager?
To open the discussion regarding the federal platform, it's the first quarter of 2022 is rapidly coming to a close, so it's time to have the commission re-vote on a federal platform. We did put out a couple of emails to staff organizationally to see if there was any suggestions, and I'll let Tanya talk about the response on that. And then I think commissioners might have brought up an item or two as well. So, Tanya, go ahead.
Morning, Tanya.
Morning, Commissioners and Chairman. Tanya Cole, Assistant County Manager. As the manager stated, I'm here this morning to provide a discussion on our 2022 federal legislative platform. And as a springboard, we have provided you with the 2021 federal agenda. I'd just like to mention that Jim Davenport with Thorn Run Partners is our federal lobbyist in D.C. and helps us with our federal platform to push that in D.C. with our partners there. So on our table of contents, we have 5 items, and I'll just run through that briefly. And then what I'd like to do, if this satisfies the chairman, is just go through those individually. And then, as the manager mentioned, we did push this out to division heads and our elected. And so as we get to each item, I'll just mention what we heard from each of those division heads if they had any input, if that sounds good to you.
That works.
Okay. So the 5 items that we have on our federal legislative platform is the Northwest Wichita Bypass, Amtrak Extension, Dry Creek Overflow Detention Facility, Health and Social Services, and then federal funding for county services. So to expand on the Northwest Wichita Bypass, we have support funding for the Wichita Bypass. This project entails the construction of new access controlled highway from US 54 at the city of Goddard to K96 between Tyler Road and Ridge Road at the city of Mays. It includes the Dry Creek Detention Basin near 13th Street North and 167th Street West. It would extend the interstate level highway system at Mays to West Wichita and Goddard. I did hear from Jim Weber, and he would like to provide some updates to this particular item. And Jim is here. I don't know, Jim, if you want to speak on this. Okay. Okay, so he has some cleanup items that he would like to provide on this, and we can get that and provide that to you at a later time.
Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have always supported this, but I tell you, there's a psychological part of this, the way we're describing it. It's continuing to almost self-harm the issue. We've got to stop calling it a bypass. This Northeast Expressway is a sexy phrase for the Northeast Expressway. It goes around the side of Wichita, and it's developed. It's an expressway. If you use the word Wichita bypass, I can see why Wichita doesn't like the term. I mean, think about it. If we would stop using the word bypass and start using the word expressway, it helps it go forward. So throughout all of our documentation, please, let's change that term from bypass to expressway. It just needs to be the sexy term versus the one that said we don't want to do that. So, thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other comments on the Northwest Expressway.
Okay, I'll make that change. Okay, next item is Amtrak Extension. Support the extension of Amtrak service from Oklahoma City, Oklahoma into Newton, Kansas. I talked to Jim Weber about this, and I think he would like to work with Commissioner Meitzner to make sure we don't have any updates or tweaks to this particular item. And Commissioner Meitzner, I don't know if you have any updates that you'd like to provide on this.
Commissioner Meitzner?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, we will know more this afternoon, actually. The Amtrak officials are in town today for a lunch meeting, and they're going to give us an update. I have been in contact with our federal, with Jim Davenport. He's up to speed. So, Jim, if I need to work with you and Commissioner Dennis just to update. But I think for all of us, the FRA has not put out their final rules on, and they've not taken, well, they're taking the information right now, mainly from states, track owners, and Amtrak, officials about how best to incorporate the money from that they receive from the, whatever it is, JIAC or whatever whichever tranche of trillion that they got their portion. Anyway, they're grabbing that information, and they're even allowing the public to make opinions into that as well. And I've been in communication with KDOT about the same, and ODOT, Oklahoma DOT. So we will know more, and I think it's progressing nicely, and so we'll see where we're at and what we need to do, so we can report back and update. So, okay.
Very good, but stand by, because I think probably after lunch today, I will have some adjustments to this.
Okay, sounds good.
That's a good point. Yep, good point.
Okay, next item is the Dry Creek Overflow Detention Facility. Support funding for a U.S. Army Corps of Engineers feasibility study under Continuing Authorities Program, Section 205 Flood Damage Reduction for the Dry Creek Overflow Detention Facility. The county will submit a letter to the district engineer requesting their assistance in determining if there is a federal interest. So in talking with Jim, I think he wants to take out the 205 funding and change that to BRIC grant. And then I think we would also probably take out that last sentence because we've likely already submitted that letter. Is that correct? Correct.
Yeah, I agree that we need some adjustments because we are applying for this BRIC grant right now. As we move forward, we've had a number of discussions. Jim and I have had several as we move forward on this project. One of the concerns that I've had, and I've already talked to Jim about this, is that we really had coupled the Northeast Expressway and the detention together. And right now with the BRIC grant, we're kind of separating that detention from the Northeast Expressway. And so I've got a little concern about that because we were planning on using a lot of dirt out of this dry retention pond to build the overpasses for the Northeast Expressway. So I talked to Jim about the possibility of, there's a gentleman named Eck that owns part of the land out there that we're going to be using for this retention, and see if possibly we can just purchase that chunk of land and warehouse that dirt until the expressway comes to fruition. So there's some other things that are working here, but the main thing is we need that BRIC grant before we can make any decisions on any of this. Without that grant, just all this is speculation and dreams. So we need to just work with Jim a little bit to make sure that we've got the right wording in here, because we're kind of decoupling two projects we've always had coupled in the past.
Okay, we'll make those adjustments.
Any other comments? I don't see any.
Okay.
Next item, please.
Okay, the next item is health and social services legislation. Support the county's health and social services needs, including legislation that addresses, and let me read off these items: mental health access that provides for coverage of marriage and family therapist services and mental health counselor services under Medicare, and authorizes marriages and family therapists and mental health counselors to develop discharge plans for post-hospital services. Second bullet is assistance to state and local governments for maximum efficiency of resources. And third bullet is legislation to end surprise medical billing. I also had an addition here by one of the commissioners, and I think this is the appropriate place to add this, and that is to rescind CMS, which is Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services vaccine mandate. So again, to add to rescind CMS vaccine mandate to place that on the federal platform.
Clarify that last one. I'm sorry, I missed.
Okay. I had a request from one of the commissioners to add to our federal legislative platform, and I think it's appropriate to add it to this section, to rescind CMS vaccine
I missed
mandate.
one word. I'm sorry. It was a rescind. Very good. Any comments on that discussion? Commissioner Lopez.
I just have one question, and I know I asked it before, but I just want to make sure that it's taken into account. Adding that language at the end won't affect any kind of funding that we would receive federally, because I do know with the ARPA funds, states that received ARPA funding, if they were trying to do anything against any of the COVID measures, that they could potentially lose some of that funding. So I just want to make sure that even including language like that won't open us up to losing any kind of federal dollars, ARPA or otherwise.
Sure. Let me defer that question to our CFO.
Thank you.
I was warned that this question may come up. So just adding it to the platform and advocating for a higher authority to overturn it should not jeopardize our funding. If we were to actively seek to violate the mandate while it's in place, that would result in some jeopardy.
Okay, that makes me feel better about it. Thank you so much.
And I think all of us are going to a breakfast Friday where Senator Marshall will discuss some of these things. We may have some more information after that breakfast on Friday, because I think he's one of the sponsors of the bill to rescind those mandates, as I recall. So don't get... I know that we're still drafting these, but we may have a little bit more of information by Friday.
Okay.
Check back with us.
Sounds good. Okay, the next item is funding for county...
Just a moment, Commissioner Howell.
Sorry.
Thank you, Chairman. I may be off in my understanding, but I believe that the Senate actually passed that already. It's over back at the House at this point. But I believe there actually is already efforts at the Congress level to rescind that CMS mandate. It's already passed the Senate. But regardless, I think it's a great thing to have on here because I think it's one of the few things that actually might really move forward. So I believe it's already got started. And I sent that out to the manager and to chairman, I believe.
One of our updates from Mr. Davenport indicated Senate did pass and it was moving on to the other side.
Yeah, so it's already basically moving in that direction, but so I want to give an accurate status of that. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Okay, Tanya?
Okay. Next item is funding for county services, COVID-19 relief, and fiscal year 2022 federal appropriations. And of course, we'll change that to 2023. So support the additional COVID-19 response and recovery legislation that provides direct federal assistance to all local governments and ensures such funding can be used to cover revenue losses. This was a request that we had from our CFO, Lindsay Poverso, to remove this for fiscal year 2023. So anything related there to COVID-19, we would remove.
Okay.
Okay. And then the next piece, support federal programs in fiscal year 2022. Again, we would change that to 2023. Appropriations legislation that enhance county services, provide formula funding, and fund competitive federal grants such as, and then they list there about close to 50 federal programs and grants under agriculture, commerce, justice and science, interior and environment, homeland security, labor, health and human services and education, transportation and housing and urban development, as well as infrastructure legislation.
Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you, Chairman. So under the Commerce, Justice, and Science one, the drug court programs, a lot of language around these specialty programs are specialty courts. So in here it mentions drug court programs to support mental health courts. Is there any talk around veterans courts? Is this the language that is preferred, or how do we handle the whole specialty courts program as one function? Specialty courts to include one that's focused on drug court, one that's focused on mental health court, one that's focused on veterans court.
Let me work with Jim Davenport to find out what the preferred language would be on that, Commissioner.
And the other one is this re-entry, that language, I know that that's not going to change here, but the re-entry program, offender re-entry program, it just seems like people are going back into jail rather than into life. So that's like a whole industry term that needs to be changed. So I'm not really asking you to do anything there. I'm just making a general statement.
Okay.
The next one, state criminal. Are we still using the word alien? Seriously? We're using the word alien?
Again, let me check with Jim Davenport on that, because I feel like these are federal programs, so we're getting that language because those are federal grant programs. So let me double check with
I
him
mean,
on
they're
that.
humans, they're not aliens, they're immigrants. I mean, I wonder, that to me is a little, needs to be changed. Those are all my questions, those are all my comments, Chairman, thanks.
Thank you. Okay, Tanya.
That's all I have for you today, sir.
Very good. Any further questions before I let Tanya go? Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. Just curious, on a state level, we did our best to prioritize amongst all the discussion. This is I don't know how many pages, 6 pages or so, 5 pages. And there's a lot of items on it. If you count the number of items, it is a lot of items. But we have it summarized with 5 high-level topics. But I'm curious, they're not handing this out to legislators, to Congress members, are they?
That I'm not sure, Mr. Manager, do you?
I
Are you aware?
I view this as a list that we give Mr. Davenport so he knows what to keep an eye on for Sedgwick County. I don't know that he's handing this out to.
Yeah, I think for us to clarify what our desires are to him, that makes great sense. We should clarify as many things as we feel like we need to. But in terms of a short list that he might lobby and hand out, I don't know how they do that at that level. But I know at the State House it's important to have a very short list, otherwise you lose them quickly. Also, I guess just to comment, a lot of this, most of this, I'd like to separate in my mind which things are asking for spending, which things are asking for some type of, spending versus services and versus policy. Those are 3 ideas, and it'd be nice to, maybe even flag some of these. I mean, for example, the CMS vaccine mandate's a policy choice. It has nothing to do with money. It simply gives us permission to do something we would like to do, for example. But a lot of these things are about spending money. And I guess those are items that we ought to track them. If it's been on this list a very, very long time and we're not seeing any movement, we probably can understand why. For them to spend money in Sedgwick County, they're going to spend money in every county, probably. So it becomes a very large bill. That's why this infrastructure bill is likely to spend money in every single community in the entire country. If we're going to see money here, then we're going to earmark that money to certain projects in our platform, I suppose. But at the end of the day, I like to separate these items between, are we asking for them to spend money or give us some type of relief or service to our people, or are we simply asking for a policy change? Policy changes are, in my opinion, are the easiest ones to pass because they're not asking for appropriations. So anyway, just as I look at this very long list, that's how I kind of break it down in my own mind. But thanks for the chance to speak, Chairman.
Thank you. I don't see any other questions. Thank you, Tanya.
Okay, sure. I'll be back to you at another time with an updated draft of this.
Okay. Next up, Mr. Manager.
And then lastly, last week, the commission and I also received a copy of a letter from KPTS concerning an offer to use their facility to run BOCC meetings after we move away from this particular office here later in the year as we migrate over to Douglas and Broadway. And so I've asked Akeem to just run a quick comparative analysis of what is being offered over at Ruffin versus what is being offered by letter. And I think Hakeem has also had a follow-up with Victor and talked with him specifically about costs. So I want Hakeem to kind of just do a quick comparison here, and the commission can discuss as they see fit. So.
Okay. Morning, Hakeem.
Hey, good morning, Chairman Dennis and Commissioners. Hakeem Ashford, Communications Director. As Tom mentioned, I went over to the space over at Ruffin Building as well as KPTS, and my visit to KPTS with Commissioner Howell and Manager Souls a few months back. And so what I've done is I've kind of done the comparison, and the first couple slides will be pictures. So as you see here, this is the Ruffin Building Auditorium. It's on the lower level of the Ruffin Building. They're off of Douglas. The first picture is just looking from the left to the right. And on your sheet that you've got here, I've kind of got that laid out for you. The next picture, this is KPTS, so PBS Kansas, KPTS. This is just kind of the open space. So this can be transformed into whatever that vision looks like to run both staff and commission meetings
So this has no particular view out right now, but again, Victor says this can be transformed into whatever that looks like for commissioners in their use. Next slide, Commissioner, kind of goes into the details. The Ruffin Building Auditorium is approximately 6,276 square feet. The auditorium seats 209 people. There are additional spaces that are available for executive sessions and meeting rooms. That's part of the overall contract that Tanya has briefed you on. Communications, our communications department as well as KPTS staff will be on hand to actually run the live broadcast. So similar to what we do in this room now, we've got our staff in the back, and then on Wednesdays, KPTS is here to run that live broadcast. For that space, in talking to KPTS, they will need internet service to be able to send the signal. So as you guys know, KPTS, the actual building is moving from the downtown location and going out east. So there's a new way to kind of do things as technology changes. They need the internet signal to be able to send that, the signal that you see on TV back to their studios. And then we will need furniture modifications, again, for the Ruffin building. There's some thought about taking out seats to be able to fit the commission as well as staff, the podium, that kind of thing. If we jump over to PBS, their studio is approximately 3,300 to 3,500 square feet. It can hold approximately 100 people to include commissioners and staff. We would have free use of a conference room that's very close by for executive sessions and other meetings as you deem fit. There are 142 parking spaces available for that area, as well as the building is ADA compliant. There are, in speaking to Victor, Mr. Hofstrom, he wanted to know that there are no security on premises. So, as we let people in the courthouse here, there would be no one to actually screen anybody. So we'd have to kind of do that on our own. KPTS staff would be there to broadcast that signal, and there would be no additional costs for that since we're in their building. There would also need to be furniture modifications for that room. As you guys saw, it's just kind of that wide open space. The next slide kind of talks about costs very briefly. The auditorium over at Ruffin Building is considered a tenant amenity. So with the lease that we have signed or will sign, there's no additional cost for the auditorium itself. However, we will need to outfit that space with new TVs, new lights, new cameras, just equipment to actually make the broadcast work. We got a initial proposal from CTI, who is Conference Technologies. They're the ones who service our current equipment. Their bid right now is $127,000, just a little bit over that. For KPTS, PBS Kansas, in talking to Victor, he's got an ask of about $60,000 a year, and that's broken down into $2,500 per meeting to actually run that space and that equipment. There is no charge for the large conference room, again, or for the parking spaces. However, it is important to note that this cost for the space of that large room is separate than what we pay them for our current broadcasting contract. And that's all I've got for that, Commissioner, Chairman. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Chairman. I have a few questions just for comparison. So we're used to this room. Do we know how big this room is and how many people it seats?
I think, Commissioner, it's easy to say that either of these spaces are bigger than.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. So either place, it's more than adequate in terms of size and number of seats. In terms of the ADA for our guests, they would probably have to park in the parking garage, most likely, at the Ruffin building. And they have to somehow.
I think there are several options at the Ruffin building. They can park in the parking garage, they can park on the street, and then there may be some availability to north of the Ruffin building. I'm not sure yet on that piece.
Yeah, the doors along the street I don't think are ADA. I don't think they're self-opening doors, and they have a turnstile.
Okay.
I don't think those doors open on their own. So in terms of pushing a button. So the walkway I think has that feature. So if they're in the parking garage, and I know there is some ADA parking near the walkway, but it's still a fair distance from the parking garage to the meeting room would be on the first level, and they'd be coming in on the walkway. So. I mean, it is a different, in terms of access, that is a bit different. In either case, whether we do the Ruffin building or KPTS studio, we're going to be using ARPA funds in either case. Is that correct? ARPA funds are going to provide the funds for this in either case?
Commissioner, you bring up an interesting point, actually. So, yes, we had planned to use ARPA for the Ruffin building. This KPTS ask is not something that has come through a formal procurement process. And so I'm actually not sure that the fact that we're having this discussion could potentially not allow ARPA to be used. Because we're having a public discussion, we didn't allow fair and full competition. So I have been communicating with some folks, and I'm going to check on that with consultants to make sure that there's no danger. As long as there's no danger, yes, our intention would be to use ARPA. Otherwise, we probably would want to find a different funding source.
I mean, from my perspective, since we're being displaced from this building, the reason we're looking for a place is because we're not going to be in this room. In terms of competition, I don't know. I mean, they are a very unique provider because they have a studio right there where they do the broadcast. So I don't know, on the competition side of that, I don't understand the legal side of what you just described, but it seems to me, from my perspective, that ARPA would be the same fund, probably, is my thought. But I would say that if it is ARPA funded, then I'm going to have to look at the other aspects of this because I don't think it's about the money. In terms of what's better for the public, I think that building's probably better for the public. This Ruffin building may be better for us because we're closer to our offices and there's maybe more staff that's available, and they'd have to transport themselves over to the other building. So for staff, it may be better to be in Ruffin, but for the public, it may be better to be at the other building. In terms of convenience, access to the space and all of that. This $127,000 at the end of this whole thing, do we have an assurance that's going to belong to the county and we're going to reuse that? And it's going to be 3 years old? How do we know for sure that's going to be usable, I guess?
Yeah, Commissioner Howell, that's a good question. So that was one of the things when we asked CTI to put together the proposal. As a TV guy myself, if you kind of look at what we currently have, we're in standard definition. And as the world has gone along, they're in high definition. So the way that things look now is because of the equipment, right? This equipment's 20, 30 years old and hasn't been replaced. So the equipment that we're asking CTI, the vendor, to buy, will be able to do that. The county will own all of that equipment and it will be transferable. So we will unbolt, unhook, and then take it along with us. That will be high definition. And at this point, we don't know what's next in the future, but high definition's around to stay. So the meetings themselves will be in high definition moving forward.
Does KPTS talk about, are they planning to, I guess, design the space for our needs, that they're gonna provide that without additional costs, or is that? We don't,
Commissioner, that will be an additional cost to actually outfit. So kind of how you guys have a bench here, whether we build it, facilities, whoever, there will be a cost to that.
But we still don't know the cost of refitting the theater room at the Ruffin building. There's going to be a cost there also.
Correct.
So we're talking cost versus cost. So again, I think we're not talking Apple. It's not the same space, but we're talking a similar type of expenditure, no matter which way we go. I guess I'll just say, when I looked at that theater at the Ruffin building, I did not like it. Just my personal opinion. I don't think there's any way you can really make that a good BOCC room. I don't think it's a great meeting space. It may be good for someone walking on the stage and talking to a small audience, but it's not really fitted for a BOCC chambers. It just doesn't. If you elevate the seats for the commissioners up to stage level, for example, that ceiling's fairly low, and it doesn't. I just don't see how it's going to work. And so I have some concerns about it. I just don't like the space. And I do know that the KPTS room is very configurable, so you can make it almost anything you want to make it. So to me, I feel, one other question, if we did not use a theater, there's no reduction in the cost of the rent because we're not using a space that's currently part of that proposal? There's not a reduction in costs at the Ruffin building if we didn't use the theater? Right now we have a proposal on how much we're going to rent the building for, and it includes the theater.
They are not charging us to use the auditorium, so there would be no reduction if we don't use it.
Okay. That's strange, but okay. Okay. I'll just say this. I think this is for 3 years, and if it's going to be ARPA funding either way, I guess I just bring up another question. We're using the auditorium, that's the term you use. Where are we going to have our executive meetings?
There is if you recall, when I walked you over there is a conference room right on that lower level that is a glass conference room. I think you can seat probably up to 20, 25 or so in that room, and I think that would be a suitable space for executive session.
Okay.
I mean, it's probably maybe 30 steps from the auditorium.
Okay. Well, I know that traveling across town would not be ideal, but I do think in terms of the meetings actually being conducted, I think the studio probably is better. I do think it's less convenient. I don't think the money is the issue. So I think there's pros and cons of either one of these. And I see reasons why I'd like to go over to the KPTS facility. I can see reasons why I'd like to maybe stay in the Ruffin building, but I don't know. I don't think it's as clear cut as maybe others feel like it is. I see there's advantages to both, but thank you. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Commissioner Meitzner?
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks for the comparison and presentation. What you just addressed, Tanya, is I had understood that the auditorium was part of our overall rent, regardless if we use it or not. So that does add a cost factor if we go to KPTS, and the pictures of KPTS, I guess I could try to vision what a future would look like, but right now it kind of looks like a typical community room where we have our advisory board meetings or just a regular. You see a lot of other smaller counties and cities have their meetings, and they have them in a room similar to that. So I'm not, and ARPA, I'm not, I've done a lot of work to any questions about ARPA funds directing to the ARPA committee. So as much as we may be able to use ARPA or whatever, that's irrelevant to me, because that needs to go through its own process if they really want to do something and work with our ARPA committee. So as presented, I'm in favor of staying towards the Ruffin Auditorium, and thank you KPTS for the offer. But it looks like it's got some cost components and some other pros and cons that doesn't seem good for my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you. One of the selling points, actually, that convinced me to vote for the Ruffin building was the auditorium. That is very convenient. We don't have to disrupt our staff. We can just go downstairs. So I, again, thank KPTS for their offer, but I respectfully decline. Okay, Mr. Manager, next item.
I think that is all we had planned for today, sir.
Very good. Well, tomorrow we're going to have an executive session, I understand. We're canceling an executive session. I thought we had one. Okay, very good. During another tomorrow, I want to bring it up, but I'll bring it up again today just so that folks don't forget. Don't forget that we have the women's NCAA coming to Wichita. We're a basketball town. Please get out and buy tickets and support the teams. One of those teams that wins here in Wichita is going to go on to the Final Four. So we're going to see some great basketball. Make sure that you attend. What I would like to see, if we could get all 5 commissioners to think about purchasing tickets. From what I heard the other day, and I need Lindsay to verify it for me, I heard we can get 2 tickets for $90 for the entire session. So that's not too much, I don't think, for 5 commissioners to show their support to buy 2 tickets each for $90 total. Think about it. But that we want the community to support this also. We want the people that come in here from the NCAA to see what a great town this is so that they come back, because remember, our Intrust Bank Arena belongs to Sedgwick County, and we have to have events like this in order to keep this as a profitable adventure. So anyway, I just want to remind everybody. I'll remind everyone again tomorrow, but please, if you have an opportunity, check with Lindsay or AJ and see about getting a couple tickets. Commissioner Meitzner.
Or Chair.
Oh, Yes, the tickets go on sale the 19th, by the way, so.
Chairman, are you going to use your share refund from your share concert money?
We may never see Cher.
Oh, that's sad. Okay. I just was wondering. Thank you.
Anything else, Mr. Manager? Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you all.